categories typically. You do see nutrition, you see tobacco cessation, you see stress management, weight management, and also physical activity. The reason that I'm passionate about nutrition and why I was able to be so excited about being involved in all of this work is that we see in all of those groups that I was able to work with, nutrition risk was always high. When we would assess an employer work site, which I'll tell you a bit more about how we did that and how traditionally we're doing that still, we were able to always see nutrition as a top risk factor. So therefore, we get a big impact when that's what we target. We also saw specifically the risk was high because of low intakes of fruits and vegetables, low intakes of water, plain water, and then also low intakes of fiber, which comes from a low intake of fruit and vegetable, but also a low intake of whole grain products and nuts and seeds. So because of these, you may be thinking, well, these are very, very specific. You might be typically used to thinking on a more global, larger scale, where we're looking at weight loss or we're looking at overall obesity rates. But when you drill down into what changes those percentages of obesity or what changes those global measures of BMI, it's the behaviors that individuals do every single day and the ones they do often. So if we're going to target and have a newer way of thinking about programming, we have to look at the specific behaviors people are doing and change those. Nutrition is one category of those 5 that I mentioned, but it spans out into many, many other parameters. What we eat affects how we sleep. It affects how well we think and process information. It affects our energy, productivity at work. It affects our relationships. It affects everything. So you can see with nutrition risk being high, it's easy to see why some would have low physical activity because they may not be energized enough to go do that and commit to that. Higher stress if they can't process things appropriately, emotional processing included. You can also see poor performance if they have low productivity because they didn't eat well or drink enough water and get hydrated, and then also poor relationships. You do see inverse relationships as well, where you're going to have stress then cause potentially stress eating, and stress eating or unhealthy eating cause stress to the body. So you do see it go back and forth, and it's a cycle. Now, I told you I would tell you a bit about what we're doing now and what is currently being done as what I'll call traditional programming within the U.S. So within U.S. work sites, what we see is typically in larger businesses where it makes the most fiscal sense, we see what's called a health risk assessment or a personal health assessment. There's likely synonyms, but vary just a little bit. But it's a questionnaire. It's a lifestyle questionnaire. Do you smoke? Do you exercise? Do you eat fruits and vegetables? Do you drink water? Etc., etc. So you get a sense of what are the behaviors people are doing based on a self-report questionnaire. You also see that coupled with biometrics, height and weight, very, very common to get a BMI measure. You can also see companies, they'll do blood glucose, blood cholesterol, including LDL and HDL. You can see A1Cs even being done. Bone density is sometimes added on. But what we see is that in addition to these two things, we're getting a lot of information, so you get feedback, most likely. The feedback typically is in the environment of a health fair. So I want you guys to envision yourself, if you've been to one before, then think back to that time. If you haven't been to one, think of a health fair you just filled out, you bubbled in a bunch of answers on a lifestyle questionnaire assessing your daily habits. And then you also had a finger prick, blood pressure cuff put on you, and you got some biometric results given to you. If you're the average consumer, you don't really know what to do with that information. Now, us in this room, you likely would. But because of that average consumer, you then have health coaching. So you take your information on a paper, you walk over to the health coach, they sit down with you, very generally describe what the numbers mean, give you a handout, you have some information to read up on when you go home, share with your spouse, your kids, etc. Then you have where the company could actually respond and provide lunch and learns or lecture style information. That's very common. What I was able to see coming into that was that it wasn't working. There were individuals that attended, similar to how you all are here. You're sitting in a seat, so I could say you're present physically, but are you present mentally? That is a huge difference. So what I was able to see is people were coming. They were coming for points or a gift card or a gas card, but they weren't actually present and conscious, absorbing the information. And when the information was given, unfortunately, a lot of the times it wasn't valid and backed by research. The average consumer, again, they don't have a formal nutrition education, even a little one. They get their information from the media, which unfortunately, nutrition and other subjects aren't always portrayed and educated with valid research-based evidence. So not only do you see that individuals are not engaged and the information may be faulty, you then have those that are engaged and soak it up. They don't know what to do with it once they get home. They leave work, and oftentimes they leave work where it was, and then they go home and they're in a different mindset. So we have to bridge that gap of work and home and also increase engagement. Because of all of our different learning styles, we also need to make sure not only do we look at reading level that is appropriate for the group that we're looking at, blue collar versus white collar. If you think of a janitor versus a physician at a hospital, that lunch and learn needs to absorb those differences and be different in the way that it presents. You also want to see if someone learns visually, you have to have visual stimulus. If someone is a kinesthetic or tactile, they have to play with it, see it, move around with it. We have to make sure we can deliver on that. You also see if someone needs to hear it. If hearing my voice is better than seeing a PowerPoint, we need to offer that as well. Unfortunately, with the traditional programming, you see a lack of long-term change, but you also see a lack of significant change. If we want to get to the work site and we want to have people actually change significantly long-term, it's going to improve the biometrics after a certain period of time and continue to, we have to get more specific and more aggressive and more innovative with the programming that we provide at the work site. What we were able to do, what I was able to take part in, was developing not a lunch and learn, one time, 1 hour, and then done, but an educational series. There's only so much you can teach in an hour, and specifically when you're teaching nutrition, there's a lot to go into it, even just general nutrition. So what we were able to do is create a series. So we have 5-session or 6-session series that we were able to do. And what we saw is this not only allowed us to deliver more information, we could deliver it slower, at a pace where they could retain it. We could repeat it week after week with recapping what they learned the week before. We were able to have hands-on activities because we had time for it, which drove engagement and also focused in on those different learning styles. And then we also had a workbook, and participants could go home with their workbook and do more activities, include their family, include a support system in that. That was at the group level, similar to a group here. At the individual level, that is where you start to get very innovative, because a lot of people, at least in America, is where I can speak from, they don't get too individual too often. It's risky because, especially with medical advice, you don't want to sit down an individual if you don't have the proper credentials or workspace for HIPAA regulations. But what we were able to do is create different things at the work site that didn't drill down to individual medical conditions, except for one of them that I'll discuss, but still got a very honed in individual small group or one-on-one approach. Of those, first one is cafe tours. So if you think of a company that has a food service provider, they have a cafeteria. That provider has menus that their chef comes up with. You can consult with them to not only improve the menu, but to also give tours throughout that cafeteria to educate employees on how to eat their lunch or even their breakfast, or if they work late, maybe dinner, at work, but in a healthy way. You can also get at that budget barrier that you also see with healthy eating if you give a cafe tour about how to order and some strategic budgeting that you can learn from the food service provider. That was one thing we were able to do. We were also able to bring access to fruits and vegetables by having an on-site farmer's market at some companies. So you bring it on, employees are able to go Wednesday from 11 to 2, get farmer's market, fruits, vegetables, honey, breads, etc., and then they didn't have to actually make that extra trip on the way home or whenever it might be not accessible to them. We were also able to have tasting parties. The point of any of these programmings is to break down the barriers in addition to motivating behavior change. Barriers being cost, that I hear very often, confidence in meal planning, confidence in grocery shopping, and then you also see, of course, budget being a very thing, and time. So what we were able to do is additionally break down any aversions to healthy food. If I threw out, coconut bacon, do you guys think that that would be tasty? Some of you know. What if I was able to bring that to you and let you taste it completely free? I'm not saying that that's a healthy food. It's just a unique combination that might make you think, that is a little interesting. I might not be open to that, or I might be. More often than not, healthy foods have a stigma for being tasteless, dull, boring. But if we can let people try it for free, and hopefully they like it, that'll increase the realisticness that they'll actually go buy it for themselves and their family. So we had this in the form of tasting parties, we called them. So you make it fun. We played games. We build things around it to increase engagement. But the main focus was increasing access, but also decreasing any aversions to healthy foods that we could. To help with the confidence in grocery shopping, I was actually able to give grocery store tours. So this is interesting because it's off-site, completely off-site, which means it may not work for every company. But I was able to make it work for a few, depending on the dynamics and how they could code their time. But you take them to the grocery store, teach them how to read a food label right then and there in the grocery, hands-on. They get to touch products. They get to look. They get to have a scavenger hunt with it. That is going to increase engagement, but also increase confidence when they go shopping the next time. Movie screenings as well. You can have documentaries that are health specific. Have a panel if you have access to that at a work site, and you can drive engagement with those. If we think more about the food service providers, if that cafe tour really is very short because there's no healthy options in that cafeteria, well, perhaps consulting with that food service provider to change their menus. Make a special menu that's healthier, and then be able to offer that and recommend that on the cafe tours. And we were able to do that successfully multiple times. Eating out guidance. If a company doesn't have a cafe, how many of you go out for lunch? No one in here goes out to lunch. Come on, okay, just got a few brave ones in the back. I've definitely gone out to lunch before. Sometimes it's a social thing. You go out with coworkers or you meet someone who's not a coworker somewhere. If you don't have a cafeteria on site, if there was no restaurant in this hotel, you guys would have to leave to go somewhere, right? So a lot of companies don't have cafeterias on site. Their employees do leave. So if we can assess what are the top 5 places these employees go at lunch, and I'm going to recommend the healthiest menu options from those 5 places in case they want to still eat out but make a healthy choice. The one thing that is medically specific that I was able to implement is dietitian consultations. So I am a dietitian, licensed nutritionist, and I was able to work one-on-one, which allowed me to increase the impact because it was one-on-one, but also the safety of anything that was recommended to the individual and these behaviors that they were going to change. Additional options and ideas, workshops, do it yourself, create your own tea, create your own spices. The options are really, really endless if you get creative with them. These are going to help change specific behaviors and also increase engagement. Family-specific events are also very important. That support system is crucial, as we all know. So inviting them on site to the employer for a movie screening or having a health fair that is family specific. We did both and they were very, very successful. I keep saying we've been successful, but specifically what we've seen is the outcomes data have shown with all of these highly satisfied employees. They are thankful, so thankful that their employers are actually willing to invest and offer these different things. They're also thinking they're very fun, they're different. They know that they're unique, which makes them feel unique and even more special overall. When implementing any of these or any programming, what you see is it's very important to have special outcome measures. Whether it's a survey or you're able to do some more hardcore biometric data pre and post. What we were able to do is, since we were looking at behaviors, not biometrics, but the behaviors that drive those biometrics, is we were able to give a survey specifically for our educational series. I know this is small, so I'm going to talk you guys through this, but the main behaviors we were looking for on this survey is confidence in meal planning, fruit and vegetable consumption, and then also that they felt healthy habits were important and could affect their life. If you don't think being healthy affects you, why are you going to be motivated to be healthy? So we definitely wanted to increase that they felt healthy behaviors would affect them. In addition, what we saw is that it was best run and most effective with expert staff. Registered dietitians that were trained not only in behavior modification, but in how to promote and facilitate the program, how to field questions that you would get. Because when you're talking about health, you can get lots and lots of different specific medical questions that we need to make sure we know how to handle. We also used evidence-based information for everything. Everything. So we were safe and felt comfortable and confident with the information we were putting out. We also made sure privacy is secured, specifically at the work site. A lot of employees don't want their information trickling back up to leadership, that they're having struggles with their weight or struggles doing different things. They might appear to have the perception of being lazy. Nobody wants their boss to think that they're lazy. So you have to make sure that privacy is secured. We also see internal incentives work best. I mentioned that gift card, gas card, points, benefits, whatever it is that got them in the seat. If it was external, when that money goes away, that motivation goes away. So if you want to see long term, you're not going to get that with external motivation. It has to be internal, emotionally tied. It's a lot different if I gave you all $25 gift card to sit here versus your dad had an amputation from being diabetic and you don't want to have that happen to you. That's the difference. That creates the motivation for long-term change. That is a very, very hard one to tease out of people. We've actually screened people before being enrolled into programs to make sure their readiness to change was in preparation or at least in contemplation. Because if they're not ready, as you guys know, you can talk until you're blue in the face, it's not going to matter. Right time, right place, right attitude. Access is very important. If you have workers that work from home, call them teleworkers. They need webinar access, or at least conference call access. On site, you need a location, you need a room. So you have to have access for individuals to come to these programs. Here is the fun, exciting statistics. This is from our educational series that we were able to roll out with the workbook, hands-on activities, week after week, supportive environment, goal setting, etc. What we were able to see is from that survey I showed you guys, 52% increased their fruit and vegetable consumption. The important thing is that 35% self-reported they were already achieving at least the 5-cup minimum per day. So that 52% is actually a very large number because 35 were already doing it. We were very happy to see that change. We also saw a 73% increase in confidence with meal planning and 40% increase in that belief that healthy eating actually affected them, but luckily 60% already believed that, which is probably what drove them to come and apply for the program in the first place. Again, I will note, these are behaviors. These are not biometrics, but what drives the biometrics? It's the behaviors that we do. I invite you guys to think of new methods. Use these or continue to think of what would work in your population or for those that work in corporate wellness or know someone that does. Be innovative to not only have evidence-based information going into programming, but also be able to increase engagement, to motivate for those behaviors, and translate what they learn in the workplace to what their lifestyle is going to turn into. Thank you.